Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is your host Gyro. Today I am trying a new build by ShakCentral and it is called Cold DOT Occultist for everyone. So ShakCentral is a very experienced player and a streamer. I have not been following him for too long and I regret that because I think he explains things really well, which is why I'm not trying to make a build guide based on his build. Instead, I'm simply giving you a source of information, and there is a lot of information here. There is leveling information, there is build overview, there is all mechanics explained a lot better than I can explain it. The cold damage is explained, energy shield functioning is explained, different defensive abilities are explained, and keystone passives that this build primarily relies on, such as Chaos Inoculation. So once again, massive credit to the creator, and this is just a showcase and my impressions of this build if you would like to know my opinion and if you're one of my followers who knows exactly how I play. So what is particularly good about this build, my friends, at least in my humble opinion? What's good about it for me personally is the fact that it's unusual. It's an unusual build. It's a cold based dot damage over time build that is on a chassis of a witch. Ascendancy is occultist. This build is complex because it starts like a normal witch build, where we would follow our typical nodes, where we would go to Arcanist Dominion, where we would take Heart and Soul, where we would invest into nodes that are giving us mana and life and health and life pool, yeah? But at the same time, when you reach end game, where the build becomes quite interesting and when it starts shining, in my opinion, and just generally in the showcases by ShakCentral, is where you change, you retrace your steps, you undo a lot of points that are done typically in this central area when we build our witches, and you go right hand side straight away here to the top, and where you take the keystone called Chaos Inoculation. Chaos Inoculation essentially is making you immune to chaos damage at a massive detriment of making your life one. Like practically you have no life pool. So all of your life increasing, max life, max health increasing nodes, they become completely irrelevant. So your maximum life becomes irrelevant. That's why we are undoing all those nodes. And unsurprisingly, we are putting every point imaginable, whatever we can reach, into energy shield. Now, even as per ShakCentral's advice, you probably should not transition this earlier build into the Chaos Inoculation version of it until you have somewhere around 4500 energy shield accumulated, so that you are not scared to die, essentially, so that you have sufficient amount of padding that replaces your life. Basically, what I've done is I was impatient, so please, if there is a learning for you here, don't be like me. I've been impatient and I straight away, because I was converting a witch of level 71 when I did this conversion and when I tried this build, I kind of was already in the lower edges of end game, so I thought, okay, let me go straight away for Chaos Inoculation and reliance on Energy Shield. However, with my gear at that point in time, even though I had something expensive like Aegis or Aura Shield, which is expensive, when I bought it, it was like 50 Chaos Orbs priced on the community market. So by my standard, that's expensive. Of course, in the grand scale of things, it's not. But it was an expensive build straight away. I just wanted to have fun and wanted to test it out and talk to you about it. So that was the point when I transitioned to Chaos Inoculation, resulting with the energy shield and effective life pool of about 3000. So even with running defensive layers, even with running auras such as Clarity, such as Determination, other kind of things, it wasn't enough to prevent massive hits that sometimes went through and kind of chipped away at my energy shield, and life pool is just non-existent in this build, so I died. And in those points, at those points in time, I died. That was my mistake and something that I encourage you to not do, and actually listen to the instructions by ShakCentral in the notes of his POE, path of building, that he includes in his build, as well as talks about in the forum post, which I also encourage you to read. But I always say to you, please spare 5 minutes at least, watch the video and listen to my instructions as opposed to going to my bare bones, barely finished often POBs. I don't have that much amount of patience and that much amount of skill with the Path of Building tool to produce a one-stop shop guide with Path of Building. So even ShakCentral kind of talks to us about that, so I can only reiterate and only encourage you to do the same thing, otherwise you'll be in trouble like I was. Now that's about the bad things that of this experience that I had. As far as the good things are concerned, look, I am actually not disappointed in terms of how fun the build turned out to be and how it was performing generally for me at my levels. I'm kind of demonstrating here to you how I went through the lower tiers of maps. As you can understand, the higher the tier of maps becomes, the higher level enemies you are meeting there, you are seeing, you're fighting against in those maps. So for me, I started experiencing issues with this build and actually dying occasionally from that lower energy shield pool. I started dying when I started exceeding my own level, the level of my witch, and started pushing for the maps that were filled with enemies that were about 2 levels above my own. So that needs to be pointed out. This is not a weak build. Yes, I transitioned a little too early to Chaos Inoculation, and I experienced issues with it, but those issues happened when I already started stretching, when I started stretching into the levels that were exceeding my own. But if you were leveling your character, leveling your witch, and sort of trying to be in the tier maps that are, I don't know, 1 level above your own, 1 level under your own, as you are organically progressing through the Atlas maps of the end game, you should be fine, even with this type of setup. To be honest with you, absolutely no issues. Now, as far as the gear is concerned, again, we're not talking about the build per se, because there is already a wonderful build guide for this. As far as my gear is concerned, I was quite well equipped by my at least standards. I had Aegis Aurora, expensive shield, and I had a few other uniques, quite a lot of reliance in my case on uniques. I did not get too many of those +2 gem levels rares, end game rares, because that would have been a much more massive investment that I wanted to put into this really test build. Overall, I think the Wintertide brand that this build relies on, is a very unusual spell for me. I've never used it before. Mechanics of it were really obscure for me, and I think they would, if nothing else, without a very good guide like ShakCentral's guide that I'm showcasing here, I think you would be turned off. You would be turned away by something as complex in mechanic as how Wintertide Brand works and how Brand Recall works. I'm deliberately not reiterating what ShakCentral said in his forum post, and I encourage you to read it because it's wonderful. It really is wonderful. Overall, though, my friends, if you are in the... So who is this build for? This build is not for absolute beginners. Regardless of a very good guide put together by ShakCentral, I still think it is not the best build for absolute beginners. There are a lot more straightforward, a lot more user-friendly, a lot more kind of rewarding and cheap League starter builds out there. My own and those from other creators as well. However, if you are a casual player of Path of Exile, however, you are not an absolute brand new beginner of the game, I think this is something that could be fun. It's like a fun project, mid-league project, I would say. It's kind of how I treated it and how I sort of encourage that you try to treat it. And if you are approaching it that way, if you already have a bit of currency here and there, if you know how community market works and how to buy items, some of which are very, very, very strongly recommended for this build as far as approach of the end game is concerned, and if you want to be remotely successful with end game maps, I don't think that you can or should try to craft everything yourself, because that will be more expensive than buying, I reckon, in some cases anyway. Then I think this build can be treated as that fun little project, mid-league towards end-league project, where you can splash a bit of currency on it, buy a few items here and there, and have a bit of fun with the Cold DOT of Wintertide Brand spreading through the mobs, kind of making them pop. It is quite a satisfying play. I do think that it is a fun little experiment, and I do think that you could have quite a bit of fun with it if you are looking for something that's unusual. Maybe you were playing specific builds for quite some time, I don't know, Holy Flame Totem, or even something that would be an occultist build, a cold-based occultist build such as Creeping Frost, or I don't know, Toxic Rain, something basic, right? And then you say, okay, I'm ready to do something more unusual. I have a bit of orbs, a bit of currency to blow on this fun project. I reckon this probably would be rated kinda medium to high in my virtual list of fun project builds that I wouldn't start a league with, but I would certainly give it a shot if I'm getting a bit bored. So for what it's worth, my friends, I hope that this was enjoyable for you, and if my recommendations count for anything in your book, then here is one for you. Do not start a league with this, especially if you're an absolute beginner of Path of Exile. I still don't think that this is the right build. But mid-league, with a bit of currency to splash out, you're a little bit bored like I am right now, I reckon this is a nice, fun build. Just don't transition to Chaos Inoculation too early, like I did. That was my main, and I would dare say only, mistake in trying to adopt this build so far. If you enjoyed this little recommendation and little showcase video from me, please like it, because there are more coming like this one. That's the only way for you to tell me that I'm doing something right and you're interested in this type of content. Counts for a lot, supports me, and you know, and it's just fun for us to engage with each other, I suppose. If not in the comments as far as chatting about builds, then at the very least by me seeing your little like here and there. And subscribe for more, obviously, if you haven't already. Thank you very much for tuning in today. I'll be speaking with you again about something, no doubt, Path of Exile related, in a few days' time. Bye for now.